And we're going to finish chapter 11, section Guardian Angels. I was at a funeral several years ago of a young woman whose death left behind 2 small children. The minister who had counseled the woman in the final days of her life told the congregation that her children in particular, that she would be watching them from heaven throughout their lives. Ministers frequently talk about the watchful gaze of the departed as part of the funeral ritual. Yet, I often wonder how much they actually intend that the family of the deceased will really come to believe they have an angel in heaven. Several of the people with whom I spoke did indeed believe that the watchful eye of a long-gone mother or father continued to oversee the events of their lives. Yet each person who told me of such a belief did so with an apology and some shyness. Adults are not really supposed to believe in guardian angels, or are they? For many survivors of early loss, a continuing dialogue with one who has died becomes not only a way to stay in touch with a lost parent, but also an important part of one's adjustment to loss. In the play I Never Sang for My Father by Robert Anderson, one of the characters says, "Death ends a life, but not a relationship. A relationship with a dead parent may go on in some form or another for as long as the survivor continues to live. Often the dead parent is imagined to be a protector, a special spirit who looks out for the child throughout his or her life." In the fairy tale Cinderella, Cinderella's mother tells her on her deathbed that she will be there to protect her daughter. "Dear child, be good and pious, and then the good God will always protect you, and I will look down on you from heaven and be near you." When Cinderella needs help later in her life, she goes to the tree that has been planted on her mother's grave and asks for intervention. It is the spirit of her mother that not only protects her but rescues her from her life of drudgery. When Scott's mother died, she was elevated to a place of sainthood in the minds of her children. "We were so young when she died that she was perfect in our memory. We never got to the point of growing up and seeing her as a real woman." Throughout his childhood and after, Scott has felt the presence of his mother in his life. "I know she watches over me. I feel strongly that she picked out my wife for me, that it was my mother who led me to her, and that my mother watches over me almost like a guardian angel. I just feel that. I don't want to get too mystical about this, but I definitely feel that my mother is watching my life." Once, several years after he was married, Scott lost his wedding ring. At first, he was panicked. The ring was not only valuable, but held great sentimental meaning for him. He sat down and thought about his mother. He conjured her image in his mind, and then he retraced his steps during the day, taking himself back to a bus he had ridden earlier in the afternoon. He then located the bus and found the seat on which he had sat, and sure enough, under the chair lay the wedding ring. Scott was convinced that had it not been for the watchful eye of his mother, he never would have found the missing ring. Often people feel the need to reconnect with the spirit of a lost parent at a time of important transition, a time when one might well feel the need for the support and encouragement of a living father or mother. One woman who still feels that she can sense her father's presence in almost everything she does remembers the night before she took her final graduate oral exams. I remember the night before the exam. I was taking it in Michigan, where I had grown up. I took a jog right by our old house, the house with the swimming pool where we used to live when my father was alive. And I had a conversation with my father. I remember thinking, gee, I hope no one is looking out their window looking at this crazy woman. But it made me feel better to be able to talk to my father and to feel his support. Another woman only resumed the dialogue with her father in adolescence after she had an important dream. She was a wild 16-year-old who had just received her driver's license. One night, she dreamed of her father, who had died 6 years earlier. Her father's image appeared to her, and he looked at her and said, "Take it easy, kid." She remembers feeling that her father was reaching out to her, giving her the guidance and something. She is now a woman in her 40s with children of her own, but the dialogue, begun in a dream, has continued to this day. After the dream, she began going to the cemetery by herself every Sunday. Cemetery visit was a time when she would sit down and talk to her father. She used him as daughters often use their parents, as an outer limit. If what she was doing was acceptable to tell her father, then it could not be something that was very bad. I'd tell him about my latest boyfriend. If I broke curfew, I would tell him that. I had no secrets from my father. She used this dialogue as a way to help her contain her own behavior, just as author Ash had said about his mother. She never did anything that she would be ashamed to tell her father. Almost done, friends. As the years went on, her relationship to her father changed. He became her confidant. She remembers telling him things before she would tell them to anyone else. I even told him I was pregnant before I told my own husband. Her worries and fears for her children, as well as her own anxieties as she tried to balance the many responsibilities of raising children, were things she shared with her father. When each of her children was born, she took the child to the cemetery so that she could introduce them to the grandfather they would never know. At times, she would lose her sense of self-consciousness and chat in an animated way, laughing, sometimes crying. I remember thinking, people driving by must think I'm a real nutcase. I didn't mean that to be flip, but I'd be laughing or crying or talking. I guess it must have looked really weird. Now that it is more difficult for her to make the trips to the cemetery, she continues the dialogue with her father inside her head. It's not something that happens every day, just once in a while when she feels the need to talk with him. Although the communication only goes in one direction, her conversations with her father are not unlike those of many adult daughters. She keeps in touch. Maybe once a week or twice a month, just letting him know how her life is going and asking for advice when she feels she needs it. Jack believes that he has changed his relationship with his father as the years have passed. His father died when Jack was a teenager. I have brought him forward into my life. When I picture the two of us now, I am an adult and he's an adult, and I'm talking to him as an adult. My father is the only person with whom I share my insecurities. I tell him about the things that trouble me and the doubts that I have for my future. I feel like I hold a spiritual conversation with my father. asking for his advice and his guidance. I do that with him and with no one else. Several times a year, Jack drives to the cemetery where his father is buried. I just sit there. It's good to know that he's there, but it is a very personal thing. I always feel better after leaving, but I don't tell anyone because I'm afraid people will think I'm neurotic or something. Jack, like the others who feel an ongoing bond with a parent who functions as a guardian angel or a spiritual confidant, does not do so as a substitute for having close and intimate relationships in the here and now. His connection to his father serves to enrich his life and gives him a connecting link to the past. One woman said to me, "You bury a body, not a relationship, not your own sense of loss." Our relationships to the dead continue throughout our lives and are an important source of support and comfort. Several people said, "Why should I give up my connection to my mother or father? After all, you only have one mother. You only have one father." Long life holds the promise of many meaningful relationships. Yet new relationships do not replace past ones. People, unlike objects, are not interchangeable. If we relinquish our attachment to a particular relationship, it is gone forever. Another cannot come in and assume its place. Our important relationships are to be treasured. A love that is brief may be no less meaningful than one that lasts a lifetime. We are enriched when we find some way to stay in touch with those we have loved deeply, no matter how long ago they passed from our lives. As one woman said to me, "To lose touch with the past is to lose touch with yourself." And that was the end of chapter 11, Staying in Touch. I've been reading to you from my favorite book by Maxine Harris, PhD. The book is titled The Loss That Is Forever: The Lifelong Impact of the Early Death of a Mother or Father. We've only got chapter 12 and a little bit of an epilogue left. So we're looking at, let's see, maybe 20 pages. Not very much, though. Thank you for catching the sunrise and the beautiful water. I appreciate you watching and listening. Thank you.